I have been losing a lot of Warhammer recently, and whilst it'd be very easy to blame my dice, my army rules, or astrology, realistically the reason I'm losing is because I'm bad. As mentioned in previous videos, I overextend all the time, and it doesn't matter what army. I attempt to go too hard, too fast, and end up losing momentum and eventually losing the game. And nowhere is this more evident than with my Screaming Ravens, my custom Space Marine chapter. The crusade I'm in has gone less than stellar, so I have to make some hard decisions now to try and improve my game. I could learn to play the game properly, actually change my playstyle, fit more into what I want to actually do with the Screaming Ravens and the Vanguard detachment of Space Marines. But that would require me not using 12 Centurions in every game, which I absolutely will never do. I mean, I could quit the game entirely. Clearly, this is not the game for me. It would save me a bunch of time because I wouldn't have to paint anything, save me a bunch of money because I wouldn't have to buy any more things, and I could spend all that time focusing on other hobbies. But that'll be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy, I'm just kidding. I do still really enjoy Warhammer, so I'm not going to quit the game just because I'm bad. So if I don't want to change my playstyle, and I don't want to stop playing entirely, the other option is to change my army to fit my playstyle. This is something I talked about in the last video, and also something a lot of people suggested. Something like World Eaters or Orcs. An army that wants to get into your face turn 1 would be perfect. But I don't really want to have to buy another new army, because I have barely just got 1,000 points of Screaming Ravens painted. I don't have to go get another army. Although I do like the way that World Eaters look, and Angron is such a good centerpiece. I know I'm not finished with Magnus yet, but Angron's really cool. And that Orc Codex is really nice as well. Maybe I could have a look at that Orc Codex. I mean, just for a treat. Just have a little look. The other option here, rather than getting an entirely new army, is to try different detachment. Every detachment in the Space Marine Codex works in some way for Screaming Ravens. Whether that's gaining advance and charge from White Scars, or assault weapons from the Salamanders. I mean, Blood Angels is a no-brainer, getting bonuses to charge. Space Wolves has something, probably. And I use a Storm Raven, so I kind of have to use Dark Angels. Thank you, Dark Angels, for nerfing the Storm Raven after I bought it before it got popular. But I feel like it wouldn't be the Screaming Ravens if I didn't use the Raven Guard detachment. So screw all these other detachments, I'm going to make my own detachment with Blackjack and hookers. Now, homebrewing Warhammer is something I've never tried before. I've done a lot of homebrewing for stuff like Dungeons and Dragons, where I've DM'd for several years. But that has been stuff like items and enemies, not something as mechanically and balance intensive as a class, for example. And D&D is a PvE co-op experience, as most people might think it's a player versus DM situation because the players keep ruining the DM's plans. With Warhammer, it's all PvP, so balance is the most important thing. And as someone who doesn't have an encyclopedic knowledge of every single rule, every single army, every single unit, it's very, very difficult to make something that is balanced. Despite that, I do think that 10th edition is the perfect time to try this. With 9th edition, there was so many rules. You had a bajillion stratagems, tons of enhancements and weapons, and just so many rules that it became very, very difficult to actually try and work out what you wanted to make. But 10th edition is very focused and very regimented. You get a detachment rule, 4 enhancements, 6 stratagems. And for Space Marines, it's even easier because one of those stratagems is Armor of Contempt, so really you're only coming up with 5 new ones. Now, there are 2 big pitfalls when it comes to homebrewing anything, but especially in Warhammer. The first is just trying to be unique. You're trying to invent something new and trying to make it special based around what you want to focus on. But just because something is unique doesn't necessarily mean it's good. And in an effort to try and make it unique, you overcomplicate it and make it needlessly specific or needlessly restrictive. The second pitfall is balance. You want your ideas to be really cool and really shine, so there's a bias to making things overpowered, so it definitely works. So instead we have to be a bit more critical. I haven't playtested any of this because I wouldn't want to subject anyone to it, but I do have a captive YouTube audience of people who are ready to rip me a new one if I ever say anything remotely incorrect or stupid. So I thought, why not weaponize that fact and present this homebrew to you guys and have you tell me what works, what doesn't, and why I'm very stupid. So without further ado, let's get into it. The detachment rule. Unpredictable, unrelenting. As with all of the names, they are free to be changed. These are just the ones I thought of because I didn't really have any better ideas. The recent Chaos Space Marine Codex has the Alpha Legion detachment, which has a really cool rule about having certain things be infiltrator. So this is similar to that, and also takes a bit of a cue from the Orc Codex with the Dread Mob. In the Declare Battle Formation step, you can select a number of units from your army. For each unit, roll a d6. Until the end of the battle, that unit and any associated characters gains the keyword shown in the table below. So as with a lot of these things, depending on the battle size, you get a different number of units you can choose, so 1,000 points 2, 2,000 points 3, 3,000 points 4. That seems fairly standard for these kind of things. I would say it's a d3, but for some reason in the Orc one, it does say roll a d6 and then 1 or 2, so I've stuck with the same wording here. So you pick 3 units. On a 1 or a 2, you get 9-inch Scout. On a 3 or a 4, you get Deep Strike. On a 5 or a 6, you get Infiltrate. So essentially 3 units from your army gain Infiltrate, Deep Strike, or Scout, which I think is very cool and very flavorful. It is likely that I'll have to actually add an exclusion to this rule. I think anything with the transport keyword really shouldn't be allowed to do this. this because then you're kind of double dipping if you can do the transport and the things that are in it. Outside of that, I think it's quite a fun detachment rule. I imagine there's going to be some serious problems with it. There's probably a unit I'm not thinking of that if you gave infiltrate to would be absurd. Next, let's have a look at the stratagems. Let's start with Disruptive Mirage. After one of your units has been shot, you get to choose that unit and make a normal move. You can't choose a unit that is within engagement range, and as it's a normal move, you can't enter engagement range with it. This is focused around that visual trickery that I've had with the Screaming Ravens, where objects may be closer than they appear. You shoot at something, but they actually weren't where you thought they were slightly somewhere else, which I think is quite a cool stratagem. Probably 1 CP. I don't really think it should be 2. And I'm not sure whether this should be a battle tactic. Battle tactics are the ones where you can basically do them for free with certain captains. There are like 4 different types of stratagems. I don't care. It's either a battle tactic, i.e. you can do special stuff with it, or it's not a battle tactic. I don't know why there's still 4 different types. It's very silly. Either way, moving on to the second one, Active Camo, because I literally cannot think of a better name, and I played a lot of Halo. This is probably one of the more unique ones, and it's quite wordy, but essentially a friendly walker unit, so some sort of dreadnought, and a friendly tech marine that are within 3 inches of each other can be selected, and they are removed from the battlefield and placed into street reserves at the end of your opponent's fight phase, assuming they are not within 3 inches of any other enemy. So essentially this is the Vanguard Spearhead stratagem, the one where you're allowed to either use 2 Phobos or 1 of any kind of unit and put them in street reserves at the end of the enemy's fight phase. But specifically this is for tech marines and dreadnoughts, something I use quite a lot. It's more restrictive on the number of units you can use, but the units you can do it on are very powerful, which again is something I think is very cool with the Screaming Ravens, having that ability to have these big tanks suddenly coming from anywhere. Again, possibly 1 CP. This one could be 2 CP, but it's quite restrictive, and the one in the Vanguard Spearhead is also 1 CP, so let's say 1 CP. Next, we have Supersonic Frenzy. During your fight phase, a jump pack unit that is charged gets +1 to wound. Fairly simple, although +1 to wound is very, very good. This could be reroll wounds of 1 instead, or reroll wounds. It might be something like that, but +1 to wound is something that's quite a premium. Next, Reckless Abandon, one of my favorites. At the start of your movement phase, you select a vehicle, and it gains the Assault Ramp keyword. This is probably why you can't have transports benefit from the detachment rule, because it doesn't really matter if you get Scout, Deep Strike, or Infiltrate. A Storm Raven with this, plus the ability to move and then get Assault Ramp, is very, very strong. And because I wrote this thinking only really about Storm Ravens, because that's what I use, Land Raiders already have Assault Ramp, so giving them something like Scout, or Infiltrate, or Deep Strike is extremely scary. But I think this is quite a fun thing that you can do with stuff like Storm Ravens. Part of what I like about the Screaming Ravens is that Storm Raven, 3 Centurion, Brutalis drop pod. Now, this will have to be 2 CP. I can't see this being 1 CP. I think you have to have this being something you have to save up for. If it was 1 CP, you could do this in the first battle round, and that's very disgusting. And finally, from any angle at any time, your shooting phase, an infantry unit from your army that has not been selected gains indirect on all of their weapons. Indirect is very strong and has caused a lot of problems across 10th edition. But if there's one thing you should know about me, it's even if there are problems that have been presented to me, I like to just dive head first into them. The Gunpla community can really attest to this. 1 or 2 CP to get indirect on something like Devastator Centurions is really, really strong. But you're not gaining anything else from this, so you will still take the fact that they're in cover and the fact that you're getting -1 to hit. But it does allow you to keep something like Devastator Centurions really safe, which may be a problem. The one thing this cannot be is a battle tactic. If it's a battle tactic, that means someone gets to use their captain thing and make it free, as well as someone else being able to use it at the same time, which makes it far too powerful. So it cannot be a battle tactic. Maybe 1 CP, maybe 2. Either way, moving on to enhancements. Start off simple. Echoing Blades. Bearer's melee weapons gets twin linked. I love twin linked. A lot of my army in Screaming Ravens has twin linked, so I think getting that twin linked on something else would be quite cool. Again, it's only 1 character with their melee weapons. Next, a name that I really couldn't think of, so it's just called a long run-up, because that's essentially what it is. In the first battle round, the bearer's unit is eligible to declare a charge in a turn in which they advanced. This is purely just me going, I always try and charge turn 1, so let's make it easier. Next, Prismatic Flare, 30 points, quite expensive. In your shooting phase, after this model is shot, select 1 enemy unit that was hit by 1 more of the attacks made by this model. To the end of the phase, each friendly Adeptus Astartes unit making an attack gets +1 to wound. This is essentially the Incursor's special ability as a enhancement for wounds instead of hits. Now again, +1 to wound is very, very premium, and the fact that I've got this here and in a stratagem is a bit too much, I think. It is 30 points, that is quite a lot, but if you got Incursors and Oath of Moment and this and Twin Linked, you're basically killing whatever you shoot. Potentially this could just mimic the Incursors rule and be +1 to hit rather than +1 to wound. That way you've got a couple of sources of +1 to hit, and that +1 to wound premium is only in the stratagem. And finally, Flicker Field. Very simple. Whilst the bearer is leading a unit, they get stealth. Nice and simple. simple, not really much of a problem here. You get a stealth on a unit, which is quite nice. Is this detachment any good? No idea. It's probably completely unbalanced one way or the other. And I think because I've gone into this trying to make everything workable, it potentially is too strong. I think you'll find with a lot of detachments, there's some stratagems or some enhancements which are very, very niche. That might be a problem balance-wise when you just have too many options of what you can do. It means you don't really have to worry too much about certain things, especially if you've got some units that are in deep strike or infiltrating or scouting beyond what they normally should be able to do. These are the best ideas I came up with. I did come up with other ideas, but they were either too complicated or a bit too powerful, or just kind of really dumb and too silly for my first attempt at this. But I'd love to get your feedback. I'd love to know what you think about this, if you've got any ideas yourself, or if you have any ideas for your own custom things, custom detachments, characters, units. I'd love to hear all of your homebrew stuff, because it's such an interesting thing to do. It's a really fun exercise. So leave all of your thoughts in the comments below, and thank you very much for watching. If you did enjoy this, go ahead and like, comment, subscribe, all the good YouTube stuff. I'll see you next time. Thank you very much for watching.